it was a shock to me. Everything he's done to Ukraine has made Ukraine stronger.
Ми продовжуємо, власне, далі тримати міцно інформаційний фронт на міжнародній арені. Сьогодні в мене в гостях канадський політик українського походження Маркус Павловський. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Сьогодні Україна проживає дійсно надзвичайно складні часи. Розкажіть, будь ласка, яка, власне, ваша особиста позиція щодо війни в Україні?
Totally pro-Ukrainian and anti-Russian. Hopefully a pretty easy answer.
Мені також відомо, що ви канадський політик українського походження. Давайте одразу з самого початку, власне, поговоримо на цю тему. Ваші предки, так, з України і також з Західної України. Розкажіть, будь ласка, про це більш детально.
Well, my baba was from near Chernivtsi, near Horodенка, and my Guido was from near Кам'янець-Подільський. I still have family near Horodенка, and the family that used to be in Кам'янець-Подільський, now they're in Odessa, around Odessa.
Гаразд, йдемо далі. Ми будемо, як я вже сказала, говорити про Україну. Зайшовши до вас в офіс, я побачила прапор український, так, перед вашим кабінетом. Що він, власне, означає для вас і чому ви особисто вирішили його там поставити?
Pride in my Ukrainian heritage, pride in Ukraine, who I think the good part of the world admires Ukraine. And so the flag there, I guess, because of my Ukrainian origin, support for Ukraine. You have two flags. One's Canada, my other one's Ukrainian. So.
Thank you. Якщо брати до відома, так, 24 лютого 2022 рік, цю дату, власне, пам'ятає кожний українець. Рік війни позаду. Які у вас наразі відчуття? Адже сталінський режим далі продовжується, і війна триває. Гинуть українці, гине нація.
The horror continues. I was surprised when it happened. I thought Putin was bluffing. Total surprise. I mean, we thought the era of warfare in Europe was over forever. That warfare was something that only took place in obscure parts of the world, places like Ethiopia, the northern Ethiopia right now, Yemen, but we wouldn't have expected it in Europe. So certainly when they invaded, it was shock to me. I thought, Putin's crazy, but is he crazy? Why would he invade Ukraine? I mean, it didn't seem like there was anything good could possibly come out of an invasion of Ukraine for Putin. So it didn't make much sense to me that he would invade Ukraine. So it was a surprise, and on the night it happened, I was up late at night sending messages to Chrystia Freeland about how we could get Russia off the Security Council. Because to have an aggressive country like that on the Security Council, because the whole UN was set up and the international legal order was set up after the end of Second World War, and it took place very quickly. The drafting of the UN Charter took place in a couple of months in San Francisco by people who'd all been, I think, personally affected by World War II. And since then, in the 75 years since then, we've had relative peace where most countries followed the international legal order and the rules of the UN. But the most fundamental rule in the international legal order is a prohibition on military aggression against another country. So for Russia to brazenly attack another country like Ukraine breaks the most fundamental rules of the international legal order and the UN. So for them to be sitting on the Security Council, the highest body in that international legal order, is ludicrous, makes a mockery of international law.
Пропрацювавши лікарем у Свазіленді, ви особисто на власні очі бачили і знаєте, що таке війна. Які поради ви дали нашим Збройним силам України і лікарям, які захищають наших воїнів?
I saw some war injuries when I was working and treated those injuries while I was working in Swaziland. That was the time of the civil war in Mozambique. Fortunately, I didn't see a lot of them. I'm sure in Ukraine you're seeing a lot of them. So my knowledge and experience with warfare is slight compared to doctors in Ukraine. So I'm sure it's exceedingly difficult. And I don't think you can have seen war injuries, especially war injuries with kids, and not be affected by that. So my heart certainly goes out to all those people, especially people in having to deal with injuries, to, especially children. But I think to everybody, because adult soldiers too. They're the children of someone. So.
Ми хочемо подякувати Канаді за те, що велику кількість часу ви приділяєте на те, аби прийняти українців. Програма QED, Work Permit, Study Permit, вона дає можливість нам на певний час, ми не скажемо втікти від війни, так, а бути там, де немає боїв, бути там, де немає сирен. Чим Канада ще планує у 2023 році підтримувати Україну? Адже ми знаємо, що наразі вже підтримка надзвичайно потужна.
Well, I think at the moment, the greatest need, I think, is military. And unfortunately, I think the solution to this is military. And so I think what Ukraine needs more than anything else is weapons, and the weapons that they need in order to fight the Russians and to drive the Russians off the soil. So I think that's the most fundamental. So I think we ought to do whatever we can in terms of providing military support for Ukraine. Now, I know the Canadian Army is not that well equipped. I don't think we have so much equipment, unlike the United States or Germany, that we have a lot of equipment that we could send. However, we do have the money, and I think that's the thought, Canada helping Ukraine by purchasing military equipment to help Ukraine. Beyond that, I think certainly Canada's taken quite a few people, women and children coming from Ukraine, and I certainly support that. Obviously, when the war is over, there's going to be a lot of rebuilding to do. I think Canada is in a good position to be able to help Ukraine. I think especially given the large Ukrainian diaspora in Canada, and I think we have a very close connection with Ukraine. Canada, I think, historically has done a lot in terms of trying to assist poor countries around the world. And certainly, Ukraine is going to be a country that's going to need assistance. I think Canada has a fairly good background in providing that kind of assistance. But really, I think coming out of this, Ukraine is going to need a lot more assistance than we're used to giving. I think you're going to need something like the Marshall Plan, a kind of greater plan to renew the economy of Ukraine and get it back, not only to where you were before the war, but hopefully to make Ukraine a real part of Europe.
У вас є зараз унікальна можливість звернутися до Володимира Зеленського, нашого президента, і українського народу. Що б ви їм сказали?
Well, I would say the president shouldn't be watching TV. He should be trying to get more tanks and bombers for Ukraine.
Ви вірите особисто в те, що Україна переможе?
Yes, I do.
Why?
I think partly you have to look at the numbers, the size of Ukraine and what Ukraine's 40 million people, and the number of men of fighting age is what? There must be about 10, 15 million men of fighting age. Do the Russians want to put in 10 to 15 million people to fight? I don't think so. I mean, they had a hard enough time calling up 200,000 people. So I know people look at it and say, well, this is a very big country against a smaller country, but I don't see the appetite in Russia for throwing millions of people into the battle. The Ukrainians will fight, and the Ukrainians, when properly armed, and they're getting properly armed, I think they will have better arms than Russia, and I think it's a totally winnable war.
Дата 26 лютого 2022 рік. Ваші доньки Шивон і Моллі особисто були присутні, власне, на протестах проти війни, маючи в руках український стяг і одітими у вишиванки, український національний одяг. Про що ви з ними говорили в той день?
Oh, my daughters are very nationalistic and pro-Ukrainian. they're only a quarter Ukrainian. I'm half Ukrainian, but they're a quarter. But they're very national. They're very proud of their Ukrainian culture. In addition, my grandfather's sister's family that's still in Odessa, two of them came over. Olya, who's in her 30s, and Nikita, who's about 14, they came, and they were supposed to come to Thunder Bay. But my daughter in Vancouver wanted them to come first to Vancouver. Oh. And they liked Vancouver so much they didn't want to go to Thunder Bay. So they stayed with them. And actually both my daughters speak a little Ukrainian now because they learned from Olya. So they're very nationalistic, pro-Ukrainian, both of them.
Чи святкуєте ви в власній родині українські свята, власне, День Незалежності, День вишиванки?
And I know this is changing and it's becoming more controversial, but in Thunder Bay and where I grew up and where I'm the member of parliament for Thunder Bay has a large Ukrainian population. As a child, when I would go to on the bus into town, a lot of Ukrainian was being spoken on the bus because a lot of people had been born in Ukraine. This was when I was a child. Now the population has gotten a lot older. A lot of those people who were actually born in Ukraine have died. Now it's second and third generation Ukrainian. So you don't hear a lot of Ukrainian, although there are some new Ukrainians who've come to the town since then. But anyhow, Thunder Bay has a very strong Ukrainian presence, a strong Ukrainian background. So in Thunder Bay, the traditional January 7th Christmas was always Ukrainian Christmas. It wasn't Orthodox Christmas, it's Ukrainian Christmas. So that was the big day of celebration, was always Ukrainian Christmas.
Маркус, чи вважаєте ви, власне, що слід призупинити повністю членство Росії в Раді безпеки до тих пір, поки Росія не вирішить дотримуватися міжнародного правопорядку?
I'd like to say, and from my heart, Russia shouldn't even be in the United Nations because they violate all the basic principles of the United Nations. And if you have a country like Russia, especially on the Security Council, I think it makes a mockery of the Security Council in the UN. And to have the brazen lies that are being told by Lavrov and the Russian delegation, to permit it and to listen to it when it is such brazen lies, I think totally undermines any credibility of the UN and the Security Council. Now, what's the answer to that? Throwing Russia out of the Security Council? If Russia was no longer part of the Security Council in the United Nations, then is there really a United Nations anymore? So perhaps Russia should still be allowed to be there. I think, and maybe what the war has shown, and there's a need for reform of the Security Council. Exactly how to reform the Security Council, I'm not sure, but perhaps one of the things that has to be examined is which countries are permanent members of the Security Council and whether any one country ought to remain as part of the Security Council. Really, the United Nations is the global kind of governing body, and under international law, it's not like we have any real global government. It's a lot of independent governments getting together. But this is the UN, that is an organization representing all people in the world. And in this day and age, should it be that certain countries get to have that privileged position at the table, especially when perhaps they haven't earned a right to be at that table. And certainly I would say at the moment, Russia hasn't earned that right at the moment. And as for, and I guess the reason it's on the Security Council historically is because it has been one of the global powers like China and like the United States and like Great Britain. But all of these countries, since the UN was formed, their power has shifted. Great Britain is probably not the same power it was at the end of the Second World War. But now, and with the attack and what turned out to be, I think, the great Russian bear turned out to be more the great Russian weasel. The Russian army didn't have the might that everyone thought it had. So really, I mean, does Russia have the might, the military presence, the power that it ought to be on the UN Security Council? I don't know. They've looked pretty anemic fighting Ukraine.
Прокоментуйте наступну фразу. Війна грецькі. Ви пропускаєте 100% ударів, які не робите. Адже я знаю, що саме ця фраза входить у ваш список улюблених.
Yes, by another someone with Ukrainian heritage, Wayne Gretzky. So it's a hockey saying, obviously, but I like it because I too probably at times in my life haven't been willing to shoot. You don't try, you never win. So that's where that saying comes from. So, and I have one of my sons who plays hockey who's very good. I think his biggest impediment is his lack of confidence and his reluctance probably to shoot. So, like you say, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And I think that's the case in life as well.
І моє крайнє запитання, на вашу думку, в чому полягає сила українців?
Well, I think, and Putin screwed it up totally. You know, Putin's such an idiot. But he thought he could walk into Ukraine and most people would be actually happy to see him and happy to be liberated by the Russians. I think Putin created a sense of nationality and purpose that is far stronger now than it was before the war. I mean, the strength of Ukraine right now is, I think, the strength that they gained from the war in fighting Russia. And adversity breeds strength. In every atrocity that Putin has committed, everything he's done to Ukraine has made Ukraine stronger.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.